Someone in your group just died. You do not have time to grieve. You have a problem. A dead body is lying on the ground, and it will not stay dead for long. Within hours, the smell of decomposition will begin to spread. Within a day, the scavengers will arrive. Vultures will circle overhead. Leopards will come to investigate. Every predator within miles will know exactly where your camp is. A dead body is not just a tragedy, it is a beacon, a signal that broadcasts across the landscape, advertising your location to every carnivore in the area. And once predators learn that there is easy meat at your camp, they will keep coming back. You need to make the body disappear. But how? Digging takes hours and enormous energy. Carrying the body far away takes time and exposes you to danger. Leaving it where it lies will attract every scavenger for miles. Every option seems bad. So what did your ancestors actually do? The answer is not what you expect. Ancient humans did not just dispose of bodies. They invented ways of handling death that balanced practical necessity with something deeper. Some methods were brutally pragmatic. Others were so sophisticated that archaeologists are still debating what they mean. Let me start at the beginning. The oldest human body disposal question is also the simplest. Did early hominids even care what happened to their dead? The answer is yes, and the evidence comes from a deep cave pit in northern Spain. The site is called Cima de los Huesos, which means pit of bones. It is a vertical shaft, about 13 meters deep, in the Qafzeh cave system in the Atapuerca Mountains. Inside this shaft, archaeologists have found the remains of at least 28 individuals. They date to approximately 430,000 years ago. 28 people, all in one place, all at the bottom of a deep, dark, inaccessible shaft. No signs of predation, no cut marks, no evidence that they fell in accidentally. The excavators, led by Dr. Juan Luis Arzuaga at Complutense University of Madrid, have spent decades analyzing the Cima de los Huesos remains. Arzuaga and his team argue that these bodies were deposited intentionally. Someone or multiple someones carried or dropped the dead into this shaft. Over time, it became a repository for the dead of this group. If Arzuaga is right, then intentional body disposal is at least 430,000 years old. That is before Neanderthals. That is before Homo sapiens. That is a species called Homo heidelbergensis, an ancestor common to both Neanderthals and modern humans. The Cima de los Huesos is not a burial in the modern sense. There are no grave goods, no ritual arrangements, no flowers. But it is a solution to the predator problem. Drop the bodies into a deep shaft where predators cannot reach them. The problem is solved. The dead are gone. The living are safe. But not everyone agrees. In 1981, Dr. Louis Binford at the University of New Mexico published a devastating critique of early burial claims. Binford argued that many supposed intentional deposits were actually natural accumulations. Bodies accumulated in pits by accident. Caves collapsed. Carnivores dragged carcasses into crevices. Water transported bones into depressions. Binford insisted that the burden of proof for intentional burial was extremely high. You had to show that the bodies could not have gotten there any other way. This debate has shaped the field for decades. The Cima de los Huesos remains are still contested, but the balance of evidence now leans toward intentional deposition. The shaft has no other type of archaeological debris. No tools, no food waste, no animal bones. Just human remains. That kind of selective accumulation is hard to explain without intentional behavior. Let me move forward in time. To the Neanderthals. Neanderthals are the best documented ancient humans when it comes to death treatment. We have more Neanderthal burial sites than any other pre-modern human species. And the evidence is striking. The most famous Neanderthal burial is at Shanidar Cave in Iraqi Kurdistan. In 1951, archaeologist Ralph Solecki from Columbia University began excavating the cave. Over the next decade, he uncovered the remains of 10 Neanderthal individuals. One of them, called Shanidar IV, was surrounded by clusters of pollen from flowers that bloom in the spring, wildflowers, hollyhocks, cornflowers, grape hyacinth. Solecki interpreted the pollen as evidence that the Neanderthals had placed flowers on the body before covering it with earth. He called them the first flower people. The image was powerful. Neanderthals as gentle souls who honored their dead with floral tributes. It changed the public perception of Neanderthals overnight, but the interpretation has been questioned. Some researchers argue that the pollen could have been brought into the cave by rodents or burrowing insects. Others point out that the pollen was concentrated in specific layers, not scattered randomly, which supports the flower placement interpretation. The debate continues. Regardless of the flowers, Shanidar Cave provides clear evidence of intentional Neanderthal burial. The bodies were placed in a specific part of the cave. They were positioned carefully. They were covered with sediment. This is not accidental. This is body disposal by burial. Now consider La Chapelle aux Saints in southwestern France. In 1908, archaeologists discovered a nearly complete Neanderthal skeleton in a small cave chamber. The skeleton was lying on its back, with its head resting on a pillow of flint fragments. The body had been placed in a prepared pit that had been dug into the cave floor. This was one of the first Neanderthal burials ever recognized. It sparked a century of debate about whether Neanderthals were capable of symbolic behavior. Today, most archaeologists accept that La Chapelle aux Saints represents intentional burial. The body was deliberately placed in a pit, covered with sediment, and left undisturbed. Burial solves the predator problem effectively. A body buried under sediment is invisible to scavengers. The smell of decomposition is blocked by the earth. Vultures cannot see the body from the air. Hyenas cannot dig it up easily. Burial is a practical solution that also, coincidentally, looks a lot like what we do today. But burial is not the only solution. Some ancient humans disposed of bodies in ways that left no trace. Let me take you to Qafzeh Cave in Israel. Qafzeh contains some of the oldest known modern human burials, dating to approximately 100,000 years ago. The burials are intentional. The bodies are positioned carefully. Some have grave goods, including deer antlers and red ochre. But here is the interesting part. Not all the individuals. Some were left on the surface of the cave floor. They were not covered with sediment. They were not protected from scavengers. Why? Dr. Ofer Bar-Yosef at Harvard University, who studied the Qafzeh burials extensively, suggested that the choice between burial and surface deposition reflected social status, cause of death, or simply the resources available at the time. Not everyone was treated the same way after death. Some people got burials. Others were left to the elements. This tells us something important. Ancient body disposal was not a single strategy applied uniformly. It was a range of practices that varied by group, by individual, and by circumstance. The choice of method depended on practical constraints and social considerations. Now, let me talk about the predator side of the equation. What were the actual risks? In 1994, Dr. Mary Steiner at the University of Arizona published a detailed analysis of Neanderthal sites in Italy and the evidence of carnivore activity. She found that caves occupied by Neanderthals were frequently visited by hyenas, wolves, and bears. The two groups competed for the same spaces. Sometimes Neanderthals lived in a cave. Sometimes hyenas lived there. Sometimes they alternated. The presence of a dead body in a cave would be an irresistible invitation for hyenas. Hyenas have an extraordinary sense of smell. They can detect carrion from over a kilometer away. They will enter caves, dig through sediment, and consume buried remains. A body left on the surface would be detected within hours. This is why burial is not just about respect for the dead. It is a practical necessity when living in predator-rich environments. If you do not dispose of the body properly, you will have hyenas in your cave. And hyenas in your cave means you cannot sleep, your children are at risk, and your food stores will be raided. Let me take you to a different kind of site. The caves of Mount Carmel in Israel. In the Skhul cave, archaeologists have found multiple burials of early modern humans, dating to approximately 100,000 to 120,000 years ago. One burial, Skhul V, contained a complete skeleton of a young adult male with a wild boar jawbone clasped to his chest. This is widely interpreted as a grave good, an object placed with the body for ritual purposes. But again, the practical interpretation is equally valid. The body was buried. The burial protected it from scavengers. The boar jaw may have been symbolic, or it may have been a practical marker. We do not know. What we do know is that the Mount Carmel burials show consistency in body position. The bodies are flexed with knees drawn up toward the chest. This position minimizes the size of the grave needed. It makes the burial faster and more efficient. It also, coincidentally, resembles the fetal position, which has led to endless speculation about symbolic meaning. But let me offer a simpler explanation. A flexed body is easier to carry. If you are transporting a body to a burial site, a flexed position makes it more compact and manageable. The flexed position may have been a practical choice that later acquired symbolic meaning. Now, let me go to a place where the evidence challenges everything. The site of Dolní Věstonice in the Czech Republic. This is a Cremation site, dating to about 30,000 years ago. It contains a triple burial. 3 individuals, a young woman and 2 young men, buried together in a single grave. The woman's body had been placed differently from the men. She was lying on her side. They were lying face down. All 3 had been covered with red ochre. This is one of the most complex Paleolithic burials ever found. It clearly involves symbolic elements. The red ochre, the arranged positions, the triple burial itself. But it also serves a practical function. The bodies are removed from the surface. They are covered with sediment. Predators cannot reach them. The Dolní Věstonice burial shows that by 30,000 years ago, ancient humans had developed sophisticated death rituals that combined practical body disposal with symbolic meaning. The burial solved the predator problem. The rituals solved something else. Let me talk about a method that leaves almost no archaeological trace. Exposure. Some ancient human groups disposed of their dead by leaving them exposed in specific locations far from camp. The body was carried away from the living area and placed on the ground, on a platform. Scavengers would consume the flesh. After enough time, the bones would be collected and perhaps disposed of in a secondary location. This practice, called excarnation, is documented ethnographically among many modern and historical peoples. The Tibetan sky burial is a famous example. The Zoroastrian Towers of Silence are another. The Plains Indians of North America placed their dead on wooden platforms. Excarnation solves the predator problem in a counterintuitive way. Instead of hiding the body from predators, you give the body to the predators. You redirect scavengers away from your living area by placing the body somewhere else. The predators get their meal, your camp stays safe, and you get the bones back later for secondary treatment. The problem with excarnation is that it is nearly invisible archaeologically. The bones are scattered by scavengers. The soft tissue disappears. Unless you find the bones in a secondary context, you have no way to know it happened. This means that excarnation may have been much more common in prehistory than we can detect. Dr. Paul Pettit at Durham University, author of The Paleolithic Origins of Human Burial, has argued that we may be underestimating the diversity of ancient body disposal practices. We tend to assume that if we do not find burials, ancient humans did not care about their dead. But the absence of burials may simply mean they used non-burial methods that left no trace. Let me talk about fire cremation. The oldest known cremation in the archaeological record comes from Lake Mungo in Australia. Around 40,000 years ago, an Aboriginal person was cremated Their remains were then crushed, burned again, and placed in a pit. This is a complex, multi-stage disposal process. Cremation has advantages. Fire destroys soft tissue, eliminating the smell that attracts scavengers. Fire also reduces the body to a fraction of its original volume, making it easier to handle and store. The ashes can be kept by the living, scattered, or buried in a small hole. But cremation requires fuel, a lot of fuel. A human body contains a significant amount of water. To cremate a body completely, you need temperatures above 800 degrees Celsius for several hours. This requires a large fire and a continuous supply of wood. In environments where wood is scarce, cremation may not have been practical. So the choice of disposal method was constrained by practical factors. Do you have wood for cremation? Do you have digging tools for burial? Is the ground frozen or rocky? Are predators active in the area? Do you have time to perform a complex ritual, or do you need to move on quickly? Every group of ancient humans answered these questions differently based on their circumstances. The result was a patchwork of disposal practices that varied across time, space, and culture. Now let me talk about red ochre. Red ochre appears in burial contexts across the world, from Africa to Europe to Australia. At Qafzeh, ochre was found on the bones of buried individuals. At Domvastonis, the triple burial was covered with ochre. At sites across Australia, ochre was used in funerary rituals. Ochre is not just paint. It has practical properties. It absorbs moisture. It can mask the smell of decomposition. It may have had antibacterial properties that slowed the decay process. The practical functions of ochre may be as important as its symbolic meanings. Dr. Francesco at the University of Bordeaux has studied ochre use in funerary contexts extensively. He argues that ochre was a multi-purpose substance used for body decoration, hide preservation, and possibly body treatment after death. The same substance that ancient humans used to paint their bodies and preserve their animal skins may have been used to prepare the dead for disposal. This connects body disposal to the broader technological toolkit. Ancient humans did not have separate systems for practical and symbolic behavior. The same materials served both purposes. Ochre preserved hides and honored the dead. Burial protected the living and expressed grief. Cremation got rid of the body and released the spirit. Let me bring this back to you. Your own death will be handled by professionals. Funeral directors, embalmers, crematorium operators. You will almost certainly not have to worry about what happens to your body attracting predators to your family's home. But your ancestors had to think about this every time someone died. They could not call anyone. They could not outsource the problem. When a death happened in their group, they had to make decisions. Dig a hole, carry the body away, build a funeral pyre, place the body in a tree, drop it in a cave shaft. Each decision was shaped by practical constraints, cultural traditions, and personal relationships with the deceased. The fear of predators was real. The need to protect the living was urgent, and the desire to do something meaningful for the dead was human. You have inherited all of this. Your grief, your rituals, your fear of death, and your practical ability to handle the bodies of those you lose. You are still deciding what to do with the dead. Let me talk about secondary burial. This is a practice where the body is disposed of in two stages. First, you let the flesh decompose naturally, either by exposure or by a temporary burial. Then you collect the bones and dispose of them in a final location. Secondary burial is documented among many modern indigenous groups. The Toraja of Indonesia keep the bodies of their dead in their homes for months or years before the final burial ceremony. The Malagasy of Madagascar turn their dead every few years to rewrapping them in fresh shrouds. The Native American groups of the eastern woodlands practiced a form of secondary burial called bone bundle burial, where the cleaned bones of multiple individuals were gathered and buried together. Why go through two stages instead of one? Secondary burial allows the living to postpone the final disposal until a convenient time. You do not have to dig a grave in the frozen ground of winter if you can temporarily place the body on a platform and bury the bones in spring. You do not have to decide immediately where to place the body if you can make that decision later. Secondary burial gives you time. It also solves the predator problem creatively. During the exposure stage, the body is placed somewhere that attracts scavengers. The scavengers do the work of defleshing. After the bones are clean, they are collected and buried in a location that does not smell of rotting flesh. The predators get their meal. The bones get proper burial. Everyone wins. But there is a deeper layer to secondary burial. It changes the relationship between the living and the dead. The dead are not gone immediately. They remain present as bones, as substances that can be touched, carried, and eventually placed in their final resting spot. The process of disposal becomes a journey that the living and the dead take together. Now, let me consider the hyena problem specifically. In many of the caves where early humans lived, hyenas were the primary competitors for shelter. Spotted hyenas are intelligent, social predators that live in clans. They den in caves. They raise their young in caves, and they actively compete with humans for cave space. A 2014 study by Dr. Reuven Yeshurun at the University of Haifa examined the relationship between humans and hyenas in Paleolithic cave sites in the Levant. Yeshurun found that hyenas and humans alternated occupation of the same caves. Sometimes humans lived there. Sometimes hyenas took over. The presence of dead human bodies was one factor that determined which species occupied the cave at any given time. If humans left dead bodies in a cave, hyenas would be attracted to the site. They would move in, scavenge the remains, and potentially become denned in the cave. The humans would have to find a new place to live. This cycle of abandonment and reoccupation is visible in the archaeological layers of many caves. Layers of human occupation alternate with layers of hyena occupation separated by sterile sediment. This is why body disposal was not just a matter of hygiene or ritual. It was a matter of territorial competition. If you wanted to keep your cave, you had to keep the hyenas out, and that meant getting rid of dead bodies fast. Let me give you a specific example from the site of Grotte 6 in France. Archaeologists studying this cave found clear evidence of alternating Neanderthal and hyena occupation. The Neanderthals would live in the cave, leave stone tools and butchered animal bones. Then hyenas would move in, leave their bones and scat. Then Neanderthals would return. The cycle repeated over thousands of years. The lesson is clear. Death management was closely tied to territory management. The better a group was at disposing of bodies quickly and effectively, the better their chances of keeping their living space secure from predators.